And we're live. Hey everybody, it's good to see you. This is Andrew, and I have with me Tim. We are covering all your update needs for Friday, July 12th, 2019.
Update.
That's the date, right? Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
I'm good. Numbers.
We're Andrew and I have been in frantic meetings all day, so we just sort of sat down and we're like, "Oh yeah, that's our top 10. Neat."
Okay. Fortunately, none of this is a surprise because most of the meetings were, review of the last sprint and planning for the next sprint. So this is like the marketing-friendly version of the wonderful Gantt charts and Jira task lists that we have been talking about. Hopefully, they are the same.
We have the best flow charts.
We do. They're so flowy.
I'm going to assume people can hear us.
Yes, we have good audio visual.
Good.
And then there was the burn down chart and the cigarette lighter.
Right.
All right. So our top 10-ish for the week is oh, mine's not even on here. All right. So this week, number 1, audio and siege weapons. Spidey's been working on the audio for moving siege engines with, big rumbling noises as they move over the ground, and the tech to allow uninterrupted or interrupted abilities to play unique one-off sounds. So, like if an ability is interrupted, it's not just cut off. There's,
So anybody who was in last weekend's test knows that we've got the Rams cruising around. They're super fun to drive and bash into things, and so we're improving the sound effects in and around stuff like that.
So who jumped in for the test over last weekend, the big American Independence Weekend test?
Ram for Freedom. The Freedom Rams. Oh man, now I want a patriotic Ram.
Yeah, I'm...
Tyler, get on that.
I'm feeling some freedom coming on.
So, anyways, Rams were super cool. We're getting some sound effects onto them.
Actually, let me just ask, chat, who jumped in? Like, how many of y'all actually went and, we opened it to a much broader audience than we have some of our previous tests.
Bumble says, that was a great test. Veruca says, me, of course. Druge says, yeah, I was there.
Sweet, 3 of you.
So
Real Life Goblin says, me.
So, cool stuff. Big destruction.
Excuse me.
Rams are cool. Like, that wonderful siege design or horrible siege design we'll see of, if you want to move a siege weapon around, you each grab a corner. Players' movements are summed up. I think it's going to create all kinds of awesome battlefield fun, but, proof is in the playtest for sure. So, please be posting your feedback and your comments into the forums, and even if it doesn't immediately iterate into a test on hatchery the next day or something, it does get worked into the schedule.
I'll tackle this one since it's a little bit related to the testing we're going to do this weekend, and I'll talk about that a bit.
Yes.
You can talk about some of the cooler techie bits because you know the tech on it a little bit deeper than me. But this week and last, Matt landed a bunch of infrastructure work around Bpos, which are building-placed objects. For any of you guys who have played around in Cube or our building structure, there's the whole concept of placing the blocks that compose the building. Bpos are... and everything else that composes the building. So, chandeliers and doors and lanterns and torches and carpets and chairs and all of that. I guess we call some of that outdoors and siege engines. So he's supporting stuff like that not becoming detached as soon as their primary attachment block is removed or destroyed. So it used to be like if you had a
torch on the wall, it just connects to the face of the block, one block on the wall.
Right, and so if that block got destroyed, your torch would just get destroyed. And so yeah, so there's a bunch of work going on around that. All of the functionality isn't in yet. There's a bunch of infrastructure stuff there that's happening, but in the midst of all of that, Matt's been taking a deep dive through all that code, and we got tons of bug fixes. And so the testing this weekend is mostly focused on BPOs, making buildings with all these cool new accessories that you can put in there. And most likely we'll have a scenario online for those of you who only find pleasure in murdering folks, which is totally fine. We don't want you murdering the good folks that are just trying to decorate their house. So this work also allowed some of Colin's work, such as items becoming dynamic and falling when they're detached from a building but not removed. And Matt has also helped Tyler and Ben fix a couple of random world editor bugs that were blocking them.
So Colin's work is... I'm not sure it's actually broken out as a separate thing here.
I think we've called it out in a couple of previous ones because it's kind of ongoing.
Yeah, it's just nailing down so that any object can be in any physics state. It's not like, oh, this is a placed item, this is a dynamic physics object. So they can be in any state and they can transition between them. So ultimately, this is the thing that leads to chucking corpses and.
So, right, like one of our physics states right now is like a projectile, and one of our physics states is a player, and those are sort of two discrete things. We're moving in a direction where you can transition between those things, so you could turn a player into a projectile or a siege engine into a projectile, so that those stuff can become dynamic and fall off and do more interesting
this is mounted on the wall. Now it's a dynamic entity moving through the world.
Right. So that gets us lots of cool physics stuff. This is sort of the same category of anyone who's played with our old siege engines. They just sort of attach to a point in space. They don't move. They're not super physics interactive versus the RAM, which is 100% physics interactive. This gives us basically the full gradient in between those.
Yeah, and the ability to, say, mount a scorpion on a wall and then someone destroys the wall and it falls off and it's lying on the ground, and then you can shove it over and remount it, and in between it might knock somebody in the head.
Yep.
So yeah, it's final fully generalized physics for that emergent stuff that we don't know what exactly is going to happen.
Right, yeah. I mean, we've already seen that with RAMs because of the high degree of physics interactions. There's some really cool stuff you can do both around strategy and disruption with and against RAMs, and we're hoping we're hoping to open up that category of gameplay to the rest of the game.
So just bringing the RAM down the hill and then get it up to speed, and then someone pops a stone healer stone right out of the ground under it and makes it catch air. That's
a thing that we've done.
Yeah, that happens. So, short and simple. Number 3, Heraldry Designer. James is continuing work on the Heraldry Designer this week, and when this is complete, players will be able to create heraldry for their cloaks and banners. Yay!
Now, my understanding, and maybe we don't have all the knowledge over here, this allows you guys to design the heraldries. We don't actually have the tech that puts them on your cloak and shields yet.
Not that hard.
But
a little bit of it's just plumbing to make it work.
So it won't be on. You'll be able to make them, but you won't be able to see them in game just yet. So
number 4. Chat.
Yeah.
I'm gonna let you take.
Yeah,
this
I'll talk about that.
You've been working with this because the chat. You originally wrote the chat.
Yeah, I wrote Chat 1.0. JB's basically turned Chat 1.0 into Chat 2.0. The new version will be able to handle permissions for rooms and all the stuff we need for a live game chat, like local chat, warband, orders, campaigns, custom rooms, secure permissions, ownerships, moderation. So all of the work for that has been done. It's currently in review. Basically, what we had before was a much simpler view of permissions and rooms. The chat server really didn't know anything about the game world, except maybe what faction you were in. And so now it knows stuff about where you are in the world and what stuff is nearby, so that you can do stuff like, local say chat, which will inform everyone, within 30 feet of you what you said, and and it knows about what groups you're in, and it knows about what warbands and orders and all of that. So the chat server just became immensely more aware of the world state. There's another piece of this for the 3 of you guys who are still using XMPP to talk to our chat server. That's going to be going away very soon.
No one uses XMPP anymore.
It's a dead format. When we were using it, it was fairly common amongst progressive game devs, and everybody basically dropped it when Google dropped it. So we've been hanging on to it because it worked just fine for us.
Let's be honest, we've been hanging on to it because it was more work to change it.
Yeah, yep. So there is a new protocol. It uses Google's protocol buffers. I don't think we've put out an API for it yet, but we probably will. And just like you could do with XMPP, if you guys wanted to write your own client, if you had an XMPP library and you were that category of really avid sort of developer/player, you could make your own chat client. That's still going to be supported. The protocol is just going to change, and we'll probably be talking about that more later.
Yeah. Although, I mean, at this point, the primary thing is just, it's going to a web app in a web page.
Yep.
I mean, and you'll open that web page wherever. That's where we are in 2019.
Yep, exactly.
Writing desktop chat clients is not a thing.
Yep. So, yeah, that's mostly done and just in the review and deployment phases, so probably in the next couple of weeks you'll see it come out.
Number 5. This is a small thing, but oh my god, it's been my pet peeve for so long. AJ is getting the escape key to close windows in the order that they are opened instead of opening the settings menu behind the window that you have open. So, you can just mash the escape key a bunch of times and eventually you will close all the windows, and then the last time it will pop up the settings menu, and then you mash escape again and it'll close the settings menu, just like games do.
You expect it to.
Yes, oh thank God.
And I'll let you handle the next one too.
Number 6, Navmesh.
Like I said, we just saw, you guys are reading these about at the same pace we are.
Yeah. So basically, Navmesh stuff is getting improved, and there are some bugs. We're tightening up the graphics on level Navmesh, as the saying goes. So Navmesh work continues. We also did a bunch, not really mentioned on here. I'm pulling stuff back from the preceding week. We did a bunch of scalability tests on NPC pathfinding just to confirm that we are where we needed to be, and oh god, we are where we need to be. So many dudes can find their ways to where they need to be. That's very not going to be the bottleneck. Well done, Lee. So, number 7, Tim.
So, on the gameplay side of things, Anthony reintegrated exhaustion back into the game, along with some relevant bug fixes to resource threshold handling that came up as a result of it. There was just a smattering of bugs, all related to resources, so your blood, your stamina, all of that. So Anthony murdered a bunch of those and turned exhaustion back on. So all of you guys that have been spamming skills with impunity, prepare yourselves.
And speaking of impunity, last week when we didn't do an update, Anthony fixed a whole bunch of stuff around invulnerability statuses, immunity to various things that were blocked on, some weird code things where it's oh, where is the place to actually hook this in? Okay, that's fixed now. So that's what he did. That got done last week. Number 8. Christina updated how ability data is defined to give Ben and better and faster control over the balance of ability stats, including cooldown time, stability, phase times, just all the numbers. So there's 2 kinds of things. There's the template for where what this is, what are the things it does, and then kind of the actual numbers are broken out just into a list so that we can tweak those really easy at runtime.
So he had a bunch of knobs already, but there were some really important ones like cooldown, stability, and stuff like that he didn't have knobs to. So we've added those to the stuff he could fiddle with already to give him greater control and faster iteration time.
Number 9, server performance. There's a server. It performs better.
Yeah, we've been doing a bunch of testing on worst-case scenarios. Rob's getting accurate performance profiles for the server so we can continue to increase performance while reducing server costs. A win on both sides. I know you guys don't care about server costs as much as we do, but, you know, less server costs means we have more money to spend on engineers and stuff like that so that we can get more and cooler features more often. Yeah, that mostly speaks for itself, but we've been doing lots of server performance, both profiling and improvements. There's some of that in this week. Hopefully you won't notice it because the servers will run great.
Yes. They always, they run a lot better.
Yeah.
Various breakthroughs, mostly around ability prediction.
Yep.
But, sometimes we will find dumb things. So, number 10. So, kind of a synergy with me and Mike Crossmeyer. He's been, just the ongoing thing of getting colors of VFX and all right. There are, on Hatchery right now, there are some pretty dramatic changes to the color balance of the game. So go check those out. We'll have some before and after screenshots in the update email too, if you do not do the Hatchery thing. Number 11.
Greatsword animations. So Scott has finished up a shared and updated Greatsword animation set. We'll add these back into the game, not only so backers can use the items, but also so that art can test and tweak the animation. So since it's sort of not obvious here, we took out a handful of different items and their skills and abilities and stuff like that because the animations were unfinished. So this is us getting those back in so that we can get more weapons, more items, more build options out to you guys.
Let's see.
12.
Armor and more armor. New Arthurian armor assets. Those will all be in the update email with some screenshots of those. Also updated pauldrons, updated helmets, just getting everything looking sexy. Still some more work to do on pauldrons to fit to various genders and races, but the base base human male form that we kind of start with because it's generic is all modeled out.
So number 14, lots of environment art concepts were completed this week on the more fantasy side of things. These ideas will help inform some of the more fantastic biomes in CU. So getting sort of more magical environments as opposed to some of the more traditional environments.
Right. So number 15, server. We're getting towards Linux time, and carrying off the VS 2019, the path forward is getting all of our proxies onto Linux, and then main game server onto .NET Core 3, and generally this falls under the same thing of just getting to a place where we can scale cheaply. So .NET Core 3 is sexy and fast.
Is .NET Core 3 comes out, what, this summer, or is it out already?
Release candidate in July.
Okay.
But it's been out in preview releases since last year.
Oh, okay, really.
So it's been kind of ticking along.
Yeah. Number 16, character creation. So Michelle assisted the UI team with additional concept art for updates to the UI, just all over the place, lots of different UIs, getting some concept for improved UI. That's it for what's on our paper. Do you want to talk about color grading at all?
I think I'll just let the screenshots speak for themselves.
Okay.
I don't have like I said, there's some different looks to the game. I took a bunch of screenshots. They'll be in the newsletter, and we're gonna make Night look better in particular.
So all you guys that complain about Night, it's fixing to get sexier.
Yeah, it'll be on. The most important thing is there are much better tools for the art team to actually iterate on this stuff and just like sit in the editor and look at the game client, tweak this number. Oh yeah, a little more, little less, little more, little less. The way artists can do.
Michelle and Tyler were oohing and eyeing over Andrew's shoulder when he was showing it off to them earlier.
So
that's our top 16.
I mean, I'll happily talk about like
color spaces,
ICTCP color space versus LMS color space versus perceptual versus linear, perceptually linear versus electro-optically linear versus. Oh, the faces.
Now you're sneaking Cross's language.
So your eye is very, very non-linear. So, like, if something has twice as many photons coming out, you do not perceive that as twice as bright. So, and then your monitor...
logarithmic, or...
It's its own
special.
thing. Yeah. It's organic. It is literally organic.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so... what does it mean to be twice as bright? Well, I mean, you just take the number of photons coming out of the monitor and multiply that by 2, and you're not going to see that as twice as bright. And there's a lot of stuff going on.
Right.
But the most important thing is making it run fast and giving the artist good knobs.
Yeah.
Gooder knobs. So.
I have a good knob already.
Yes, your knob is strong. You have a small max.
Do you guys want to go all the way to 5 for questions? Do you need to stop sooner?
Let's we kind of ripped through that top 10 list. Let's make it a quarter of 5, and
so we can do 25 minutes. And
All right. So give us your questions. We have 2 programmers here, folks. So ask programming questions. Digital Arsonist asks, any chances CU will also be playable on Stadia close to launch?
I will almost certainly say no, not at launch. That's yeah.
So the between the lines on that is not at launch, but it's not off the table later.
Stadia. I call it Stadia. I think Google calls it Stadia too. So, for those who don't know, that is Google's streaming service. So the idea of just, game is completely hosted in the cloud. It just sends basically a live stream of the game down to your web browser, and so you don't need to buy a video card. Of course, that means the hosting costs are much higher.
And you have to have really good internets.
Salidri asks, any ETA on key binding fixes and being able to drag and drop abilities on your hotbar?
So dragging and dropping abilities is in the not very far pipeline, I believe, as of the last we talked. Key binding fixes, I don't know, unless you're talking specifically about fixes for how your abilities are key bound. So, yeah, no, it's I respond with a question, and then we have to wait for the chat.
Let us know more specifically, Salidri. Fanglo asks, are there plans for more interactive BPOs? For example, if I click on a chair, I sit down, or if I click on a light, it will turn on or off.
Yes. Oh, I love the easy questions. The gameplay team was, in particular, I believe Christina was working towards that fairly recently, of just, Doors 1.0 was basically saying, okay, just have a generic interactable setting on things, and, you click on the door and it transports you to the other side of the door for, like, little small postern doors, just as a way of validating that. And, that generically interactable, little mini script could very easily play an emote. In fact, you use the interact on a chair and it plays the emote of sitting down in the chair was, I think, one of the specific, just like, what is the earliest test case that we're going to do on this. So, yeah.
I mean, I think long term, like, we may have even mentioned it in the notes today of just siege engines as BPOs. That way, depending on if we capture BPOs in your blueprint, you can blueprint your keep with the siege engines where you want it and rebuild it and all of that jazz.
That obviously implies, putting a pile of crafted siege engine items into the pile of materials that go into reconstructing your building. So at some point, when we kind of close that economic loop, then we're going to turn that back on, where you must pile the materials there for your building to rebuild itself.
Yep. So you need a pile of blocks and a pile of doors and a pile of chandeliers and a pile of torches and a pile of siege engines if your blueprint is comprised of those things.
Right, and that's a big part of the economy of the game, but we don't have all the parts of the loop there to close right now, and so we just let people build buildings, and whatever they put in their blueprint gets assembled for them without any material costs. But yeah, that was totally relevant to the answer to the question that was asked, wasn't it?
Inflicting MHZ asks, what tool do you feel your team is missing in the build process?
A vastly better world editor. That's probably the single biggest, oh my god, we need a better tool. Secondly, I would say just general purpose, like flow and ops and infrastructure.
Yeah, one of the things we talk about, like probably my two is it is difficult for us to take very small specific subsets of a change for the art and assets. It's just not a trivial thing to, like, hey, this model was this rock is floating in the air, or this rock is the wrong rock, or something like that. It's not a trivial matter for us to change that one rock on anything other than hatchery.
So there's a giant database that we use for like all of our game data, just models, just where is you place a rock in the world, and fine-grained tracking of changes in that database of like, okay, this is the someone went on hatchery and fixed this, which database find just that change or set of changes and move that forward as a hot fix. Bull's working on that right now, though. So that's something that's going to come online fairly soon. Like, that's a very identified need for what does it take for the game to go live. Less the better world editor is the one that's just kind of hanging out there sucking. Because it's it's a miserable experience. It's the world editor is a tool that no one would choose to use. This tool that is a tool that we pay people to endure.
Real Life Galbo asks, how soon will we see support classes in game?
I don't know. I know Anthony's been working on the skills for them, but I don't know what our ETA for them is.
Yeah, Tim and I have, we kind of have like sub-scrums, and Tim and I have moved into the infrastructure sub-scrum to kind of deal with exactly the thing that we were talking about.
Our immediate group of people that we get daily updates on is more about infrastructure and less about gameplay. So I don't know we don't know the day-to-days on that particular thing, but I know Anthony was working on them.
We should just make Farinelli come on these so that how soon, and he's like, well, here's the Gantt chart.
Allow me to pull out the flow chart.
Excuse me while I whip out this Gantt chart. And it just like goes from all the way up here to all the way down there.
I feel like that Tyler is judging me.
Cylindri says, in regards to the hotbar, I just and rebinding keys. When I rebind a key on my hotbar, it doesn't change the binds. But I'm happy to hear about dragging and dropping now.
So yeah, the TLDR there is, we know that the skill bar, manipulating the skill bar is not a great experience. And everybody harps on it, and I don't know exactly where it's on the schedule, but I believe fairly soon.
Skymaster PT asks, what will be the test of this weekend, if there is one?
So I talked about that a little bit earlier. A lot of that is focused around the work that Matt got in related to BPOs, our primary focus of the test, which I believe we just let betas in on Nuada Prep, is around building and BPOs, which are the building placed objects, the chandeliers and torches and all that jazz. That's happening right now with betas. Assuming nothing catastrophic happens this afternoon, we will probably have one tomorrow at our normal time, which is noon EST EDT to 3, most likely. So that's assuming nothing goes catastrophically wrong this afternoon.
Yomi GW2 asks, assuming you don't intend to have a target cap for AoE skills, are you at all concerned from a tech perspective that having the server calculating large numbers of AoE ability damage having a severe impact on server speed? Or is this something you test with your bot server stress testing?
So yeah, it's something we test. Having a skill that like just fans out wide is something that's super friendly to multi-core stuff, so that's easy. The place where we get into trouble with it is when like you have to fan out and then gather back. Like if say someone made a skill that does a broad AoE and causes a bunch of damage, and also the caster gains back a point of health for every person they touch, then like going wide and then gathering that back is that like rejoining creates more load on the server than I would like. But if it's just purely fanning out, then that's doable.
That being said, we will probably have a mix of like pure uncapped AoEs and some capped AoEs just for gameplay reasons. Maybe your guy swings his sword and hits 2 to 4 guys, or maybe you drop a bomb and hit all of the guys. So most of those decisions come down to design, not technical. As an example, there's actually one, like a lot of the melee skills, like the goal is that you hit one guy in the arc in front of you, and so if you have a target and you swing your arc and that guy is in your arc, we just hit your target. But if that guy is out of your target, we still only want you to swing one. We still only want you to hit one guy, but we run an arc test in front of you and sort of figure out what the best target for that is. So in that case, we're doing that spatial query, we're doing the AoE query, but we're only hitting one guy. So from the technical perspective, as Andrew was saying, we do the AoE query because it's not that expensive, but we only hit one guy.
Mr. Peace 84 has 3 questions about Rubble.
3?
How is Rubble going to behave come launch? How long is it going to stay there and obstruct movement? And is there a technical reason why now it keeps bouncing around after it falls to the ground instead of staying there?
Number one answer is that we just want it to be a little more stable and come to rest better. Number 2, how long? That is, that's definitely going to be a gameplay question. We're going to figure out what the right balance on that is. One of the things is we would like it to maybe, big chunks fall, but then do more just breaking up as they land. So, fewer, more smaller obstacles are the result. And also, the intention is to have a, harvest ability where you can gather, treat a chunk of rubble as a resource node to get back the blocks that
sort of salvage them.
Yeah, that you would like to use to rebuild your building. So to facilitate that, we are going to be upping the time that it persists after the fact, but also putting in maybe more ways to knock it around. So number 3, the why. Okay, so the way physics sims on computers work is that they are adding a bunch of constraints to an object and then trying to resolve all the constraints. So when you have a very jagged shape that is sitting on uneven ground, like, well, this point needs to be here, and and so like, all right, so then it tips around that point, and then wait, okay, so this point needs to be above this ground here, so push it up. Oh wait, now that moved that point. So it's the physics solver is generating multiple points of contact and then trying to find a compromise between all of them. And there's like a certain number of iterations that kind of causes it to go back and forth, and this is mostly just about tuning, to be honest.
Yeah, and like I said, the part we haven't built yet is basically the part that forces it to come to rest and become the salvageable, gatherable spot. So there's a little bit of physics we need to do to make it sort of less wobbly, and a little bit of gameplay tech that we need to do to sort of turn it into those gathering nodes.
And those are kind of independent of each other.
Yeah.
Scott Florence asks, I recall it being stated that one's client won't be told about players their character can't see, preventing things like peeking. But what about seeing the shadow cast by someone around a corner?
So, yes, but it's not perfectly fine-grained. Like, there's always a certain amount of lag between the client and the server. So, like, we tell you about people who are just around the corner. Like, that's, because, like, you could spin your camera to where you could see them faster than the server could, tell your client about the guy, and that goes over the internet, and you receive the message, and then your client constructs a mesh with all of their customization and places it in the world, and this is total thing, including network round trip, of you telling the server that you've moved your camera to having a mesh that is on your client is like, that's potentially on the order of hundreds of milliseconds. So, there is slop there.
Yeah.
So if someone is, completely on the other side of a hill, or they are, like, actively using a camouflage ability, then that's the case where we're not telling you. But just around the corner to where they could cast a shadow, yeah, we're already telling you about that. So we haven't really added anything specifically thinking about shadows, but, shadows just kind of fall out from the
necessities.
Yeah,
of,
we're not checking whether the shadow
light.
would cast. We're not checking whether the shadow would cast into your view. We're just checking, is it close enough to your view, and and then we just tell you. And there could be times when, like, part of someone's shadow would cast into your view, but we're not telling you about it because we're not doing that check on the server, because the server doesn't render the world. But it'll be close.
Yomi, you have a long question that's in multiple parts about, from the perspective of the server, what does the type of behavior look like when AoE abilities involve some kind of return to center mechanic that is higher than preferred?
You want to talk about reruns?
Yeah.
Server stress.
So, so if this is going to be a deep dive into server tech. So the server is very, very concurrent. You don't want to do a single-threaded server. That would be dumb. On the other hand, you don't want to be like taking a bunch of locks all over the place to be like, all right, this thread stalls because someone else is modifying, because someone else might be looking at this entity. So the way it works is that we have all these actions, and the actions fan out across all the threads. And they all just run on, and each of them, and when something wants to modify an entity, it makes a, every entity in the world is like, just this little tree of components. There's a health component, there's a damage, there's a skill queue component, there's like 35 components that make up a player. And so whichever components, like, you're actually changing as part of touching the entity, get, you make a copy of that component. And it's like, it's sufficiently fine-grained that it's not like this massive thing. So then, that thread then has its own copy that it's modifying. And so all the various threads, when it go through a commit phase, and this is something called optimistic concurrency or multi-version concurrency control, or there's various names for it. So, and in the commit phase they say, okay, well, I took this version of this entity and changed it to this version of this entity, and if like the master set of entities has the version that it started from, then it just puts that in.
Basically, if nobody changed it out
Yeah.
from under you.
If no one else changed it and committed a change first. So like we run all the changes in parallel, and then we just commit all the changes kind of, the threads take turns committing changes. And so the changes that, the case where, all right, an action ran on this thread and it changed this entity from version 1 to version 2, or 1 to 2A, and this thread changed the entity from version 1 to 2B, then this thread commits first, and then this thread goes to commit and it says, oh, well, the master version is now 2A, and I started from version 1, so I'm going to just grab 2A and rerun my action entirely. So in that way, like, as long we can, without taking any locks or any synchronization or anything else, we can have all the threads running, just running flat out, making all the changes to all the entities. And in the case where they go to resolve and there's a conflict, which is like a very, very minuscule part of the action time, the resolve is super fast, then in that case that action gets run a second time. So what happens if you fan out with just like blast like fireballs in all directions, and every single one of those fireballs like hits someone, and then you get health back? So what happens then is potentially like there's 100 entities that all, as part of being hit, want to modify you. And so those changes to you, if they are coming like asynchronously, would all roll in and conflict. And
so you hit 100 guys and their health all goes down, and maybe that gets rerun once or twice because reasons.
Yeah, because maybe one of them got hit by someone else at the same time that your AoE hit them, and one of those actions gets rerun.
Right.
But,
and so that's 1 or 2 out of 100, so like 1%. And then they come back and they all try and heal you because you did, an AoE life drain. And the first one changes you, and the other 99 also change you, but the first one lands, and the other 99 realize you've changed, and so now they have to run again.
And eventually, it all does get resolved, and so, it's just like the server load is slightly higher, but that's something that ultimately, because there's 99 actions that are all trying to modify the same entity, those actions have to run sequentially. So that's kind of a bad case for how our server work scheduler goes. So I hope you actually wanted like a deep technical explanation, because you got a deep technical explanation.
I think they did.
Good.
You guys, I think we have a good one to end with. You guys ready?
Okay.
All right.
Do it.
Inflicting Megahertz asks, what upcoming...
Wait, no, you can't just drop that. How does he spell it?
It was
It's
MHZ.
MHZ.
It's the second time he's had a question. He called him MHZ last time.
Oh, God damn it.
All right.
I said it correctly every time.
Max said it correctly every time.
That's definitely not the first time I've said it correctly on stream. Inflicting Megahertz asks, what upcoming coding problem are you most looking forward to tackling?
I am actually really excited to just take the bulldozer and push through getting everything running on Linux. I mean, all the code was written to be super portable. I started my career in the game industry just, at a crappy little porting house in a failed strip mall in gang-ridden parts of East LA. If you've seen Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, there's this the town she is in is West Covina, and there's this horrible musical number about how they cut all the funding for the high school band. go several towns over and even crappier. That's where I was. So, but anyway, yeah, just doing ports. Like, take this game, convert it from this platform to make it run on this other platform, and it's just you just push through, like, just type, and it's very satisfying to me, and very payoffy. I learned a lot from taking apart all these games. I did the first conversion of Half-Life to Mac that they didn't release, and then years later Valve wanted to do their own themselves that they controlled. I did I converted Deer Hunter to Dreamcast.
Were you the guy that ported it to arcade?
Yeah, that was just like, why? The Dreamcast audience is not the Deer Hunter audience, but they wanted to pay us to do it. All kinds of things like that. But yeah, porting is very zen-like.
Yeah. And in case anybody got improperly excited, we're talking about porting our servers to Linux, not our client, though a lot of that work will go towards making it easier to port the client to Linux if we ever decide to go down that road.
I mean, kind of the path to getting the client on Linux is to write a Vulkan renderer and then move on Windows and then move the client in that order.
Yeah.
And hey, then we have a Stadia client too. But that is not this day.
Andrew's very particular that quote gets
Everyone says it wrong. They're like, but that day is not this day. No, but that is not this day.
I don't have a soapbox, but you can stand on the cushion.
Do not come between a Nazgul and his Lord of the Rings quotes.
I don't know what to say. I'm just laughing at
Yeah, so I've been spending a lot of time doing ops and cloud ops and stuff, so I don't get as much time to write code as I used to. I will probably pitch in for teensy bits of the Linuxification, which, as Andrew says, like, that category of porting stuff is really, really zen. You just sort of, like, put on your music of choice and rock it out. And then working with some other folks on our server controller, which I think I've talked about before, which, allows us to choreograph bringing online hundreds or thousands of servers. It's just really, really cool, the power that software like that has.
Yeah, one script and
you can accidentally spend a
cost the
couple
country-
$100,000.
Yeah. So get that right. All right. So thanks everybody for tuning in. We will see you next week. Wait, do we know which day the server
the test will
is
probably be tomorrow noon to 3 Eastern time. So keep your email, check your emails for that. We should have that going out, but I would be surprised if it doesn't happen.
All right, and everyone, be sure and put a chandelier on Sacrix's head. See you later.
See you later.